Now, recently I've seen some talk on Twitter and YouTube and all around the works about Lonzo Ball and how he's a bust in the NBA. Now, this isn't something that's just come out of nowhere. People were calling him a bust after his first 10 games of his NBA career, his second season, his third season, and now his fourth season. Like, it's happened every single year of his career, and I completely disagree with it. And normally I just let it fly because I didn't think it was the majority of people. But now that I saw on Twitter, I got ratioed pretty harshly for saying he wasn't a bust. I saw a number of people commented on Twitter, YouTube videos coming out saying that he is a bust. I'm not really here to debunk or attack YouTubers or anything like that about them calling him a bust. That's their opinion. But in my opinion, he's nowhere near a bust, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. Now, before I do that, if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you want. Dropping a like really does help out how the video goes, so that would be cool. But enough about that, because we want to talk about Lonzo Ball, and I've got a lot to cover, trust me. Like, I'm going to tell you exactly why he is definitely not a bust. Not even close. But we've got to start with the expectations, because what is a bust? A bust is someone, in my opinion, someone that doesn't come close to expectations. So someone that's game from college or high school doesn't translate in the slightest. He doesn't show any signs of being the same player that he was in college as he is in the NBA. That's, in my opinion, a bust. Someone that's out of the league in a few years. He can't impact a team in a winning way. He's just not a good player overall. In my opinion, regardless of position, a bust should fit that criteria. Now, there's a few rare examples. Say LeBron James was seen as the chosen one. If he came out and he was an average NBA player, like, I could see that as a potential bust because he was seen as that good. Like, he was seen as above and beyond anyone else. That's why I could see him being a bust. But other players selected in the top three, they don't have that same credit. Now, I've seen people try to say Lonzo is a bust because his dad, LeVar Ball, said he would be the next Magic Johnson. Mike Korzemba said he would be Steph Curry with a 40-inch vertical. All these crazy takes that just weren't realistic and wasn't what anyone else expected of him. Draft experts, which I'm going to show you the draft experts' expectations of him and projections, because I tell you when it's close to what he's done in the league. But anyways, these expectations that LeVar said of him. LeVar also said LiAngelo Ball would be a top scorer in the NBA, the leading scorer. He said he would beat Michael Jordan in a 1v1. He has said some outlandish things. That's why some people love him or you hate him. But at the same time, can you take everything serious from a father that clearly has a ridiculous amount of confidence in his sons? Nothing wrong with that. But since when are we taking a father's ridiculous confidence in his son and turning that into his projection as a pro? No one else thought he was the next Magic Johnson. Some people thought he'd be a generational passer, but they didn't think he'd be the next Magic Johnson. So LeVar Ball saying that and him not being the next Magic Johnson does not mean he's a bust. But anyways, talking about some more credible people who projected Lonzo in the league, I'm just going to put a couple of draft reports on the screen from Draft Express and The Ringer. Pretty reliable sources. They don't get everything right, but pretty reliable. You can pause it, read all of it if you want. I'm not going to take minutes to read it, so I'll just give you a rundown. I'm going to give you a summary. Basically, in summary, they said, Lonzo has elite vision. He's a great passer. He's got the potential to be a good shooter and slasher. He's got good defensive instincts and a high IQ. They also said, on the flip side, that he needed to play alongside a guard that could create, particularly in the pick and roll game, and he also struggles to beat defenders off the dribble or finishing at the rim. So, great passer, elite vision, can shoot the ball, struggles at the rim, struggles to beat defenders off the dribble, needs to play alongside a guard that can create for himself and for others in the pick and roll game. Who does this remind you of at the NBA level? Really good passer, good in transition, throws up crazy lobs, good vision, good IQ, good defender. It's Lonzo Ball. It's almost like his expectations coming out of the draft is like matched up with what he's actually done in the NBA. It's almost like these guys who watched college and watched his games and projected him as a player in the NBA thought he was going to be someone that wasn't going to be averaging 35 points a game, a 35-point triple-double like Westbrook. He wasn't going to be that kind of guy. It's almost like these guys that took the time to actually watch him and look at his strengths and weaknesses saw that he struggled finishing at the rim, he struggled getting past defenders off the dribble, but he was a fantastic passer, a good defender, and had all of these traits on the positive side and on the negative side. All of these traits that are exactly the same at the NBA level. When people criticize Lonzo, that's exactly what we've got from him at the NBA level. So does that mean he's disappointing, or does that mean he's just living up to what he is? Maybe he wasn't the perfect prospect that some people who watched 5-minute highlight videos thought he was, and he actually had flaws in his game that he still has at the NBA level, but he also had some strengths that he also has at the NBA level. But I'm not done yet. It's almost like last year, Lonzo actually had a situation that was good for him. So he was playing alongside a pick and roll guard who could shoot the ball and create for himself and for others. That was Drew Holiday. Now he's playing on a team that have no spacing, that move the ball at a snail's pace. He's alongside Eric Bledsoe, who's not half the player or the same fit as Drew Holiday is for Lonzo, and all of a sudden his numbers are down and he's not playing as well. It's almost like he's in a worse situation than he was last year. It's almost like situation actually matters for Lonzo, like people said it would out of college. But what do we know about Lonzo? If you know Lonzo Ball, you know he was great at getting out in transition. He's a great transition passer, and he can actually finish in transition. He pushes the pace. That's his strength. Last year, the Pelicans were the 4th fastest team in the league, which suited him. Now, all of a sudden, they're the 5th slowest. Do you know how big of a turnaround that is? To go from one of the fastest flowing offenses to a snail's pace. They've got no spacing. It's all isolations, Zion isolations, Brandon Ingram isolations. Lonzo is a glorified spot-up shooter. And it's not like this is surprising. I made a video about this before. Stan Van Gundy literally said that he thought for his team Lonzo could be a spot-up shooter as his role. Like a secondary ball handler and a spot-up shooter. We're actually seeing how that works, Stan. It's almost like when he got out in transition and he was allowed to play his game that was his game in college and was his game at the NBA level, he thrived. Now all of a sudden he's playing in a slow offense with no spacing and a point guard that doesn't suit him alongside him, and he's not thriving. Potential. That's potentially a reason, but I'm not done yet. I'm not even close to done because there's so many things I need to cover, and there's so many reasons that Lonzo isn't a bust. So people have this perception that if you don't live up to your best case scenario, you're a bust. Like, do you realize it's a best case scenario for a reason? So when he was compared to Jason Kidd, that was best case scenario. The odds are that he's not actually going to be as good as him. That's his ceiling. So ceiling, yeah, you get my point. Like, you understand it. And the realistic case, someone said, was in between Ricky Rubio and Jason Kidd. Now let's look at those two numbers throughout their first 4 seasons, because that's how many seasons Lonzo has currently played. Kidd averaged around 12.5 points and 9 assists throughout his first 4 seasons. Lonzo is currently averaging 11 and 6.5. Numbers don't tell the full story, but that's not really a crazy discrepancy. That's around the mark. And, well, Ricky Rubio, these are his numbers throughout his first 4 years. Lonzo finds himself somewhere in between the two, like he was projected to be. My light has gone off. That's probably not going to come back on for the rest of the video. Yeah, Lonzo's actually somewhere in between what he was projected to be. Like, that's crazy to think that he hasn't lived up to the absolute best case scenario, which was a Hall of Famer, Jason Kidd. And he's still in his 4th year. He's still got time. But I talked about the fast pace last year. Some people may think, oh, Lonzo wasn't actually that good last year. He only put up like 11 and 7. Yeah, well, let's look at the last 32 games of the season. He was coming to a new team, a new organization, playing for a new coach, and a number of different things with new teammates. So you could expect that maybe he had to adjust to some things. So for the last 32 games, that's half the season. That's a pretty good sample size. He was putting up these kind of numbers. He averaged 14.2 points a game, 7.5 rebounds, and 8.5 assists. And he was doing this on just under 44% from the field and over 40% from 3 on over 7 attempts a game. Now, some of this had to do with the Zion effect, and we know how well these two played together because they were allowed to do what they did best, which was getting out in transition. But those were the numbers he was putting up. This goes along with elite defense and elite IQ. When he was allowed to play his game, he put up those kind of numbers, which are great numbers. Great numbers on great efficiency. Now, fast forward to this season, yeah, the offense is slow and he's playing alongside Eric Bledsoe, and people wonder why he's struggling. But not only last season was he putting up numbers over those last 32 games, were they just empty stats? The Pelicans weren't a good team. Well, actually, when Lonzo put up those numbers the last 32 games of the season, the Pelicans went 19 and 13. That's probably the best stretch of games they've had in like 3 years. And that was because Lonzo Ball was playing his best and allowed to play his style of game. And in this space of time, they were actually the 2nd fastest team in the league, not the 4th, the 2nd. So they're one of the fastest teams in the league. Lonzo was allowed to be what he can be, which is a transition player, someone who can shoot the ball when played alongside someone who can create for others like Drew Holiday. And all of a sudden, he looked like a top 10 point guard. He was putting up great numbers and he was leading a team to wins that currently can't win at all. So it's not like it was just some ridiculously talented team. We're seeing the same team, probably slightly worse because obviously they don't have Drew Holiday, but we're seeing a similar team without Lonzo being the primary guy, and all of a sudden they're nowhere near close to a 19-13 record. Now, with all this in mind, this was his best stretch. At times, he hasn't played this well, and at times it's not just been because of the system, it's been because of other things, his weaknesses that they pointed out at the college level. Overall, I think he's been maybe slightly disappointing. Slightly disappointing. He was projected to be somewhere in between Jason Kidd and Ricky Rubio, and we've seen him when he's at his best. He's that kind of guy. He's a top 10 point guard in my opinion. That last 32 games, if you're leading your team that currently isn't a great team, the Pelicans weren't a great team, if you're leading them to well above 500, above 600, and putting up those kind of numbers on those kind of shooting splits for over half a season, that's a top 10 point guard, and that's what he was, not to mention great defense. If you can be a top 10 point guard when the system is actually suited to you, that you can't be a bust. Like, how can you be a bust? It's not like he was expected to be the next Magic Johnson by draft experts. But I'm not even done because, I really need to nail this down because I just want to finish this once and for all. The criteria set for Lonzo to be a bust. This is what someone said to me, and this is how I got ratioed. A top 3 pick that doesn't become a superstar is what people said was a bust. So that's fine. If that's the criteria, that's cool. But I'm going to go through every single other player that was a top 3 pick from 2018 to 2010 because I don't want to discount anyone that's only been in the league for 2 years. That would be crazy to do, wouldn't it? It's not like people were calling Lonzo a bust in his second year, but I'm not going to do that because I'm not other people. But from 2018 to 2010, by the way, I said some of these names on Twitter and everyone actually said they were busts. So this is pretty unanimous agreement that this is the kind of players that people are considering busts. DeAndre Ayton, Marvin Bagley, Markelle Fultz, Lonzo Ball, Jahlil Okafor, Andrew Wiggins, Jabari Parker, Anthony Bennett, Otto Porter, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Derek Williams, Enes Kanter, Evan Turner, Derek Favors. Are some of those guys busts? Yes. Are some of those guys disappointing? Yes. Are some of those guys not busts because they've been injured, they've had situation things, they're actually good NBA role players, which sometimes people have to realize you can't always get a superstar in the draft. But even if we just discount all of that, okay, let's call them all busts. That's 15 out of 27. Lonzo's in his 4th year, is he not? I mean, you could say it is probably his 3rd year because he actually missed 80 games throughout his first 2 seasons, but it's his 4th year. We'll give him that. 2 other players that weren't all-stars until their 5th year, Victor Oladipo and Bradley Beal. So they would have been considered busts if we looked at this criteria 4 years into their career, which is exactly how many years Lonzo is into his career. That moves the tally up to 16. 3 other players that weren't all-stars until their 4th year, Lonzo's year as well, Brandon Ingram, Jaylen Brown, and D'Angelo Russell. That would move the tally up to 19. If people were considered busts by the start of their 4th year for not being an all-star. 19 out of 27. But even if we don't count those 3 guys, it would still be 16 out of 27 for people that would be considered busts for not being an all-star in their first 4 years of play, which is exactly the criteria set for Lonzo Ball. What else can I say? So pretty much if we want to be fair and say 4 years into your NBA career, if you're not an all-star or a superstar and you were picked top 3, realistically there's been 8 out of 27 players live up to that. So we're counting Victor Oladipo and Bradley Beal as busts? Well, that's what people would have said if they were given the same criteria as Lonzo Ball. My camera keeps turning off right now. It's out of juice. Basically, Lonzo's not a bust, and the idea that he's a bust, when he finally got a chance to actually do what he was projected to do from college and given the right situation, well, he led the team to a record of 19-13, which they haven't come close to doing. He put up fantastic numbers and he played fantastic defense. Do I need to say anything else? That's all I've got to say. Lonzo Ball is not a bust. He's in the wrong situation at the moment and he's maybe just in some bad form. Have you ever considered that he's just playing in some bad form? And he was actually in some great form last year for most of last year?